okay, what are the EO themes that are coming up? And this literally included us going through the WhatsApp group and asking our forums and things like that. And these were the themes that came up: values and culture, hiring, high performance team, motivation, performance management, succession planning, values and culture, staff shares, succession planning for the owner, etc. And so the amazing team from Mindcore built out this 4-part series, of which we are now in session 1 today, or episode 1. And so today we're going to be talking a little bit more around the first pillar of these 4, which is around hiring, values, culture. We've got a very exciting speaker, Helian Smutt, coming up later on in the session. So I'm really excited to learn more about that. A little bit more around housekeeping. We will be doing some polls throughout the session, so please remember to fill out the polls. These are really useful for us because it allows us a reflection to build in perhaps more content for the next series that is relevant to what you want. The other thing is we'll be having some breakaway sessions, and in these sessions it's super useful for you to have your camera on and to have your microphone off. So imagine we were doing an EOA learning day, and we've really got allocated a table. It would be great to have everyone fully present for that time. I'm going to start by introducing Jackie and Natasha from Mindcore. Jackie has been with Mindcore for almost 6 years and is the group managing executive. At Mindcore, she's had success in finding and placing top executives across industries where she's built strong relationships and takes a personal interest in understanding the client and their business. Her core focus has been with human capital consulting area, with a specific focus on human capital strategies to drive business, and focusing on behavioral development of leaders and workforces, business transformation, and performance management. So Jackie will be taking us through the first section of today's talk. She's been hugely supported as well by Natasha, who has come up with a lot of the amazing questions that we're having today. And Natasha's background is, her academic background is in clinical psychology, and she has a passion for mobilizing the fundamental drivers that enable organizations to achieve their goals throughout the talent value chain. And she focuses a lot on full talent acquisition, effective onboarding, training and development, succession, organizational design, assessments, performance management, through clear and measurable metrics, all within a foundation and ability to incorporate organizationally customized competencies. That's a lot of big words, but basically what that means is that they're really competent, and we're looking forward to hearing more about what they're doing today. So I'm going to hand over to Jackie, and later on I'm going to introduce Helian, our next speaker. I wish everyone an awesome morning, and thank you for joining us so very early. Over to you, Jackie.
Thank you very much, Kim. Let me just share my screen. Okay. Thank you, everyone, and for taking your time out today to spend these couple of hours with you. We're super excited, and as Kim has so eloquently put, we've been working on it hard for a couple of months now, and we really hope that we've hit the mark. And obviously as well, always open to discussion to make sure that it's as practical and user-friendly for you as possible, and to demystify this thing that we call talent, which we're going to use as a core foundation for all our episodes. And as Kim has already taken you through, especially in terms of session 1, 2, 3, and 4, you'll see a golden thread that pulls through. So just a little bit of housekeeping so that you're aware that we are very conscious of your time. The day is split out, as Kim has already said. I will be taking you through a discussion around how to take control of your talent and how to really drive competitive advantage in terms of attracting, in terms of culture, and any other questions that may come up as a competitive advantage in your environments. We've got a fantastic speaker, as Kim has also said, at 8:15. She's going to present for about 30 minutes, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A. specifically focusing on culture. And then we're going to take a 10-minute break just to give you a bit of a leg stretch and so that you can look after yourselves. And then we're going to start the breakout sessions, which really is where the rubber hits the road and you can start applying and looking at the questions. I've got a fantastic team behind me with Natasha and Kim and Lara and everybody that will be running the polls and running the questions. So they will be administering that. So with that, I'd like to just start off. And I mean, over decades, we've been discussing talent, and talent has always been a challenge for most organizations. And typically it is sat in the HR domain. People have always relegated talent and talent management and selection into the HR environment. But over the last couple of years, especially with how things have changed, and never more so than last year, as we've all seen, the world has turned upside down. What is required out of organizations and our people, how clients engage with us, how people are buying, has changed almost 180. So over the last 3 years, based on a survey that was done actually by KPMG last year, in terms of how it shifted over the last 3 years, talent has gone from only 2% within organizations globally as a competitive lever or important area to focus on from a competitive perspective, to actually being the most important at the end of last year. And we've seen this through our own experiences, which I'll share with you from a Mindcore perspective, as well as what we've seen in the market. Most organizations typically at the moment from a leadership perspective are sitting back and going, well, how can we get insight into how our businesses are actually doing? How can we predict that performance? And how can we ensure that we attract the right talent? Now, these questions are germane across all industries, regardless, whether you're in manufacturing, whether you're in professional services, whether you're in financial, it doesn't really matter. Most business leaders today want to be able to make proactive decisions within their environments. And what's come out, what is very interesting, is the businesses have realized that the biggest differentiator for them is not their product. It's not necessarily their brands. It's not their pricing. It's not innovation. The one critical area that cannot be duplicated in any environment is your culture and the level of your talent that you attract and retain into the environment. Now, the team here, we are passionate about talent, and we really watch the trends across the world. And we've seen that come through with organizations where CEOs, CFOs, board members are taking a personal interest in terms of how they attract their talent, how they develop their talent, and what cultures they are developing within their environments that is going to make their brands attractive to become that employer of choice. So I would like to share a little bit of theory with you, not too much. I'm not going to drain the slides at all, but just from a discussion perspective to get the thinking right that this is a systemic process. I must say it's quite strange not seeing people's faces and getting the discussion going, but I'm assuming everybody is still there. So just to have a look at it, when we look at talent and having a look at some of those questions, and I'm sure some of those questions have resonated with many of you. As I said, organizations want to make accurate and predictive decisions. And people like ourselves, we have a wonderful way of complicating something quite simple. And although this slide might look a little bit complicated and with a lot of copy on it, basically what it's saying is your strategies, your solutions, and your enablers within an environment needs to be integrated. That is when you're looking at attracting your talent in, developing them, and also understanding what drives performance and productivity. So just in a nutshell, it's when we look at our strategies, and strategy really is just laying the plan. Where do you want to be? What do you want to do? And when you look at this, you've got to be able to understand the capabilities you're going to be requiring. Over and above that, you've also got to understand from a solution perspective, what are the particular levers you need to be able to pull, given where your organization is at. And there's a lot of best practices out there. There's a lot of methodologies out there, but more than anything, and over the last 22 years in this environment, we've seen that it has to be practical. It has to make sense for you. So consultants come in and they do your designs, etc. That doesn't answer your particular business need. So you've got to have a look at what are those particular levers that are going to really exponentially drive to give you the toehold in the market. In addition, you've got the enablers. Now, when we say enablers, we're looking at what's going to make them even more effective when we are looking at hiring and attracting and building a culture of performance and high performance, which in of itself can sometimes be a bit confusing. So that talks to how are the organizations designed? And more importantly, what is the culture? Who do we want to be? What do we want to be famous for? I've seen when we've been called into organizations many occasions, the one question is not come and find us people with X, Y, and Z skill. It's about where do we need to go? How do we actually set ourselves up for success? What are you seeing in the market? And we actually help the clients then go through that process in terms of defining that strategy to ensure they drive the right culture, they attract the right talent, and then they retain them. Because the drivers for most talented individuals, or any workforce for that matter, is not about how we remunerate or how we incentivize. Obviously, those are very important. Those are some of the hygiene factors that we have to cover. However, what is driving people at the moment when they're joining organizations is, does this brand speak to me? Is this an organization I want to be part of? Does it align with my values? Is there a social impact? You know, am I going to learn and stretch? Those are key criteria for talented individuals in the market and not in the market that will actually make them move for the same amount of money. And sometimes we've seen even for less that they would move. So when getting these guys on board, selection is not just about getting them in. Selection is about defining what you want to get in, why you need to get them in, and where you're going to place them to make sure you develop them effectively, you deploy them in the right roles that are going to challenge them and ensure their productivity is increased. And you're going to connect them to people in your organization that are able to teach them, because you cannot take away from the intellectual knowledge and organizational knowledge resident within an environment. That cannot be taught. So all of those elements working together is what creates high performance. That's what creates almost the stickiness in an environment for individuals to engage. There was a study done not so long ago, in fact last year, where looking at talent practices and accurate selection practices, there was a net increase on competitive advantage and revenue of 10%. Now that's enormous if you look at that in the context. So just to unpack a little bit, and we are going to, I see a poll has come up. Is everybody still there?
We're there.
Fantastic.
Yep, we're here.
Fantastic.
We're here.
Wonderful. So we're going to get some questions going and flowing as well. The reason I wanted to show, this is just an example for you to understand that the process of selection is not just about the recruitment. Here we focus, and we will share the deck with you. and I'm definitely not going to work throughout it. You see things like recruiting and onboarding and transitioning, but the core here at any one point is to focus on the engagement of your critical workforce segment. Now, what is that? Critical workforce segments, in a nutshell, is that element within your environment that is continuously adding exponential value outside of their job descriptions. You cannot operate without them. And it may be your production line. It may be your supply chain. It may, in fact, be your sales environment. Depending on the types of environments you are in, you would need to identify who that is. And that workforce segment is the one segment that if you had to lose, you will shut your business down. Obviously, the agility of that environment is also very important. With the, I don't know how many of you have heard of the acronym VUCA, and what that basically stands for, and it's an acronym that's used throughout the world in terms of the market and businesses currently, which stands for volatility of the market. It stands for uncertainty in the market and in business. It stands for complexity and ambiguity. So with VUCA and that volatility and complexity in the environments, and we're seeing the rate of change and AI and machine learning and robotics and everything coming in, market shutting down, companies shutting down, that's becoming more and more and more complex. So the one differentiating competency that we've seen is the adaptability and agility of organizations to respond and remain relevant, and the ability for the workforce to be resilient, and the cultural environments, the belief systems, the values that retain them will actually make them produce above what is expected. So if you drive nothing else in your organizations, it is how can we constantly stay relevant, and what skills do we need to remain relevant? So we will share these with you, and you can go through the slides as you wish. But what we've done is over the years is really create something that's very simple. And I would like to use a metaphor. We've all lived in houses. We've all built houses or added onto houses. And sometimes that's the easiest metaphor to ensure that we simplify what we're talking about when we talk about this thing, talent and selection and culture. So to simplify these areas in terms of the integration and in terms of the engagement of the workforce is, sorry, this thing keeps popping up, apologies. Why is this not moving? There we go. So in terms of simplifying it, and I don't want to just say strategy, when we have a plan to build a house or to add on to a house, we've all got very different needs based on where we want to go, what we want to be, who's going to live in the house, and we've got to have a plan. So in business, that is your business model, your business strategy that needs to become practical. And it's quite interesting that only about 10% of all organizations globally have actual business strategies that they implement, which also goes to say, well, why have a strategy at all? Most environments work with a business plan and things that you can execute quite quickly, but it's critical that you have that. Now, the next component of building a house is, outside of obviously choosing your ground and where you want to go, is to really build the foundation. And when we're talking about that in a talent perspective, or from a talent perspective, it's really your job profile. When we look at selection and when we start in any type of environment, and I've seen it on many assignments that I've worked in, where you go in and organizations don't really know what they want to recruit for. and how they want people to show up on a day-to-day basis. But they know they want people to produce, and they want to be able to measure them. But unless they start at a strong foundation where you've got an accurate profile, which consists basically of two things. The first being an output-driven job description. That's all it is. And I'll give you a bit of an example of a profile just as a view that we've actually developed for one of our clients, and that's being used. What that is what knowledge does this person need? What are the skills that I'm looking for, and what are the qualifications? And as I said, in simple terms, that tells you what the person is going to do. Based on the previous slides, we've understood, especially with VUCA, it's not always as simple as that. The real differentiators is how they respond, how agile they are, how they show up, how they engage with the brand as the biggest consumer of the brand. So what's important is how they deliver. And that's where the job analysis comes in, looking at what behaviors are needed. And we'll talk a little bit about that. What experiences are important. A lot of experiences, we learn from our experiences, what we've done well at, what we failed at, and that creates a tacit knowledge and exponential value in our individuals and our workforces. And then the other component from a profile point of view is what drives this person. You know, and that links through to one of our next sessions that we're going to look at, which is remuneration and incentivization as well, where if you're recruiting in sales, you're not going to tell this person, well, you're going to be developed, you're going to be sent to INSEAD, you know, we're going to throw a lot of technical things at you, because if they're driven by recognition and reward, that is their core motivational driver. Or if they're driven by reputation and brand, you're not going to put them in an environment where they are sitting alone in an office. So understanding your people, understanding your culture, and understanding what drives them, more importantly, is one of the most important areas, more so than the skill and the qualification, because a lot of that can be taught. You can't teach a lot of the other components. You can't teach impact or energy. You can't give personal experiences. So the individual comes with that. And when a workforce looks at joining a brand, they are interviewing you. So they're looking at your impact in the market. They're looking at what your brand stands for. They're looking at, is this a type of organization that I want to be involved with at all from a values perspective? You cannot believe how many of our candidates will not work in particular industries because of the social impact and values and belief systems they have. And looking at the new generational workforce coming through, more and more are saying, no, I want to work in an environment where I've still got family time. I don't want to work for one boss. We're seeing a huge trend in the market where people are saying, I want to work on projects, even at an executive level. They want interim roles, 12, 18, 24 months. Now, globally, that is more accepted than in South Africa. We are a little bit behind in terms of that type of philosophy. But from an organizational point of view, executives are saying, and the workforce is saying, we want to take back control. And we choose where we work, how we work, and when we work. And as an organization, we can say, well, that doesn't work for us. And that's fine. So there's no right or wrong. You've just got to be clear in terms of what that is. So once you've got your foundation of your house, you then start looking at the structure. And as I mentioned, it's really around, what do you want this house to look for? How do you want to live in it? How many people are going to live in it? So you can build this out and reduce this according to your organizational objectives. So one of the first areas that we look at, sorry, I just want to take a sip. One of the first areas is that we look at what is the culture of the organization that we want to define. And Helene is going to talk a little bit about that in her presentation when she joins us at 8:15. But culture is critical to success. We've all heard the phrase, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, you know, there's very many hypotheses around that, but nevertheless, if your culture isn't succinct, if your culture does not display who and what you are, your business is not going to have the toehold in the market. How do we align the environment and make sure that the systems and processes are there to enable? And how do we communicate? Now, this doesn't mean you've got to run on a large communication strategy, etc. It's just doing the simple, practical things. Be visible, walk the floor, understand your people, and be transparent. Then from that, we have a look at the first component of the structure, which is now that we understand what we're looking for in terms of our profile and how we want to drive these individuals and engage these individuals, we start looking at things like, right, now we know where to start looking for them because it becomes very clear. So that's what we typically refer to as talent acquisition. And that's where you look at the industries, you look at the types of companies you want to source from, the levels of people, the types of experiences. And what's also becoming quite complex in that type of environment is you're seeing a convergence of roles. So a lot of organizations are integrating, as an example, the marketing and HR role as an executive role. And the reason for that is that data has become king in organizations to actually inform decisions. So the best people in the market that understand the environment better than anybody else is marketing people. They're running continuous analysis and they're collecting data and analytics on a continuous basis in terms of how do we grow that database and retain and attract new clients. Exactly the same for people. So we're seeing this convergence with our HR functions where they're using the same type of approach because people want to also be a workforce of one. They want to be able to experience it as an individual and become more personalized. And that means that the skills within these functions where it used to just be HR or marketing or sales no longer exist in the purest form. And that's why, again, it's so critical to do that upfront profiling and analysis of who and what you want to be from a cultural perspective. Out of that, we start creating talent pools. And I'm definitely not going to drain everything, but there's a lot that sits under acquisition. So as far as the talent pools are concerned, these are areas where people are driving for future succession. They're also saying, maybe we don't have that role available yet. We all know that a lot of our kids are going to varsity and, we've seen the stats that by year 3 of a 3-year degree, everything they've learned in year 1 and 2 are old. So they've got to continuously upskill themselves. And however, when looking at that, you may not have that role ready yet because that job doesn't exist. Those criteria don't exist yet. And it's the first time ever that we're working a little bit in the dark, all of us, where we don't really know what we're gearing up for. So that's why the softer skills have become probably the biggest differentiators in terms of success. And those are the ones that I'm talking about: resilience, engagement, impact, adaptability, optimism, problem solving. Things like that are really becoming the differentiators in terms of organizational success. So your talent pools you will create when you're ready to dip into them, but you need to know where those skills are. Do you need to develop them? Do you need to acquire them? Do you need to build people within your organizations that you actually didn't even know had that potential? Then, of course, you've got the recruitment component, you've got your assessments, various assessment methodologies. And I mean, there are hundreds. I see in our organizations that we work with, companies get so confused because you've got your CPAs, and you've got your EQIs, you've got all these assessment methodologies, and they don't really know what they're assessing for. Very important. If you're assessing for potential, for succession, for attraction, for development, you use different types of tools, and you don't have to have all the answers. So utilize people within your committees and within your networks to give you that examples and where they've actually applied it effectively. And then the other component that I just want to touch on quickly is mobility. Talent mobility is becoming key. If you remember one of the first slides we showed, we had those 3 circles that say develop, deploy, connect. One of the things around developing and deploying people and engaging them is they don't want to be recruited into a job and die in that job. Those days are over. People don't work in organizations and stay in organizations for 40 years anymore and get a gold watch. They move. Nowadays, if people keep people in an organization for 3 years, they're doing exceptionally well. So if you can engage your talent and allow for opportunities within your environments where there's mobility across functions, and they're learning and stretching, as opposed to holding on to them in a particular job, that further engages your workforce. Then the next area is around the competencies, your workforce planning. I'm not going to spend too much time with this because really, as I said, it depends on the organization and the maturity in terms of what you want. As I mentioned up front, one of the most important areas is, well, how do I identify that critical workforce? And this is not a complex environment or a complex thing to do. It's really just looking at the numbers, looking at the business and understanding what drives value and who drives exponential value in your business. If you have to remove them out of your business and your business is not going to operate, they're critical. It's the same with your key man in terms of succession, your CEO, your chief commercial officers, which is becoming a huge requirement in organizations. It's no longer good enough to just understand financials. You need to understand acquisition. You need to understand post-merger integration. You need to understand diversification of products outside of being a leader. So leadership and business leadership has become more and more and more complex. And gone are the days where everybody looks to the CEO to make all the decisions. So CEOs have become more and more aware, and anybody within the C-suite, that's being your financial officers, your commercial officers, etc., have become aware that their success is driven by surrounding themselves with a top talent in the market and giving them the mandate to drive that innovation. The two obviously talk to one another, and then you've got your learning components that you build on top of your foundation. So these really are the areas and the key critical steps that you would take from an organizational perspective in terms of building high-performing teams and making sure that your organization and your culture that you're driving is enabling your workforce and not hampering them, not tying them down and killing their innovation. A big area that we've seen from a Mindcore and from a market perspective is one of the areas we've become very bad at because we tend to look retrospectively just at output. So the numbers, we all run businesses and we look at, so what are the sales? What do we close on? What is the revenues? What is our EBITDA? Those are retrospective metrics. They are not helping you make decisions go forward. So we don't create environments and cultures in our businesses that allow for failure, because it's completely contrary to what we've been taught. We get recognized for success. We don't get recognized for failure. However, if I ask any one of you where your biggest learning came from in all your experience, and if I look at the participants and the members within EO, we've probably got hundreds of years of experience. Your biggest learning comes from your failures, not your successes. So creating cultures and environments where you allow people to fail forward fast. I'm not saying what'll break your organization, but where people are able to fail and learn and apply quickly. And that is critical going forward in any agile environment. Then we've also got succession, which Kim mentioned right at the beginning, I know is a big area for organizations and success of organizations. We've seen in the market, especially in South Africa, where a lot of executives they understand talent management, they understand succession, they understand that they've got to do this, but they haven't done it. And now the time has come where they're ready to transition out of the business because you need different types of leaders given where your business is at. And they haven't got anybody to take over. People aren't ready. They may be a year or two away from taking over because we've got stuck in the details of being in our business and not working on our business, not working on our talent, not working on our top executives to ensure we've got that succession plan in place. And especially for key man roles like your CEO, your chief financial officer, your chief commercial officer, your HR director, those are key man roles that fundamentally impact your environments. Need at least 2 or 3 people that should something happen, they would be ready to step up at any point. And again, coming back to our foundation around what do we need, where are we going, and how do we show up? It's as simple as that. Then the last piece of the structure in terms of our house that we are building is how do we reward? And this is definitely going to be one of the sessions that we're going to focus on. So I'm not going to spend too much time. We're going to have some discussions around this. But once you understand what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, how we've defined our culture, and how we've built out our structures to ensure agility and high performance and engagement, and we understand our people, then we know what we need to recognize. How do we provide long-term incentives? How do we involve short-term incentives? So STI is really just short-term incentives, LTIs, long-term incentives, share schemes, etc., equity, and so forth. These are just certain reward structures that can be, and they are customized. The days of having just pure grading and a generic approach to reward, those days are over. We've already discussed the rate of change that is required within environments, so it doesn't make sense to have a static reward structure. And once you're done with that, then you've actually got the final component of your house that you've now built, and everybody's happy, everybody's been looked after, they've got their own rooms, everybody knows what they're doing, and you put the roof on. And it's been many, many times that personally I've had in my career, people come to me and say, our people are very disengaged, they're not producing, so we've got a problem with our performance management. We need to put in new metrics and we need to put in new key performance indicators. And that's probably the last component that you implement. So if you don't have these areas, it doesn't make sense. It's like starting a house and putting the roof on, you've got no structure. So how you protect your organization and your people and your culture and how you measure this is with performance management. And this really talks to your goal alignment, again, pulling out of where you want to be, who you want to be from a cultural perspective, from a brand perspective, and then how you evaluate that. Most organizations from a performance perspective have if you're mature, 40% will be focused on the softer elements. So your behavioral components in terms of culture, in terms of values, in terms of competencies. And the other components will be focused on your actual output of your job. So that is what performance management really focuses on. So with that, and just to check in again, if everybody is still there, we are about to start actually with our next speaker, but if we still got a minute before we go there, I do hope that's given you a bit of a practical example in terms of how to take something that's quite convoluted and can be quite daunting at times and just simplify it. Just step back and make it simple and take it in a sequential manner and apply it. And the best way to do it is apply it. So what I have done, and I think we've got, have we got another minute?
30 seconds.
30 seconds. So I'm not going to then spend time at all. It's and I can't seem to open the link here, so please forgive me. I'm just going to go out, and we will, just from a draft point of view, to give you an example of what it looks like, is if I can do this. And in fact, what I think I'm going to do is not going to show this right now, but here's an example of an accurate job profile, looking at your competencies, what it looks like and what it should be from a pure example perspective that we've done for one of our clients, as well as, so now you've done all of that, what are the questions I ask in this interview to look at behaviors and to look at culture? Where do I even start? So I've also put a example together for that. So we will share that with you, and I have run out of time. So I thank you very much for your attention. I hope you found it informative. And if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. Thank you very much.
I think what we'll do is we will share the examples with you at the end of the agenda, where we talk through the EO panel and questions and answers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jackie. So I think my takeaway there, first of all, the polls were fascinating. No surprise there at 100% strike rate of hiring someone that you regretted later. I think we're all unanimous there. I think my takeaways from the last 30 minutes was I had a look at that KPMG article, super interesting. You know, they compared up until February, how low, I mean, talent was at 1% in February 2020, and in March, April, it went up to like 22%, whatever, along with supply chain, which obviously seemed pretty constant and certain before, but was thrown into, thrown into havoc. I also learned about the VUCA principle, which I'd actually never heard about before, so that was really interesting. I really like the idea of getting your house in order, and the concept of either going really deep or being able to keep it pretty simple. You can go modular or you can go mansion. And I think with talent, I think that's a really wonderful way of putting that forward. The candidate is interviewing you is something that is really prevalent, I think. What are your values as an organization, or even maybe as a CEO? I really also enjoyed the bit about trends, what's happening at the moment, especially with project work. So even that executives are looking to work on a project basis. So that was really interesting. Finally, one of my favorite books is a book called Setting the Table. And it's a book about hiring for the 51%. And that is exactly what you spoke about, where you're hiring for the softer competencies, the things that come through human nature, and not necessarily the hard skills that are forever changing in any case, and that by next year may be outdated. So it was really great to hear that reiterated. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So our next speaker is Helene Smuts, and really interesting. I actually love the name of her organization, Credo, because Credo really is all about your values, what you stand for. Helene is the founder of Credo, which is a people development consultancy. She's also an advanced coach, a personality profiler, an expert in behavioral psychology, and she holds an honors degree in industrial psychology. She's a captivating keynote speaker, and of course, we all know her fondly as the learning chair of EOA. She has more than 15 years experience developing people and high performance teams, and she's worked with a range of businesses from startups to blue chip companies across 5 continents. Her obsession with high performance has led her to deep understanding of impact of inter-team dynamics and how to get her clients' team members to work better together. When she's not working, Helene enjoys quality time with her husband and her twin girls. She absolutely loves traveling and spending time in the ocean, diving for crayfish, scuba diving, and trying to surf. And what she omitted in her bio, which I'm going to add, is that she's a very passionate red wine drinker. And I know this from experience. So I'm going to welcome Helene warmly. Thank you so much for making the time to come and speak with us today.
Amazing. Thank you, Kim. And Jackie, thanks for that intro as well in terms of talent and everything. There's quite a few things that I've made a few notes of. Yeah, Kim, regarding the red wine, it's a bit difficult at the moment when you see your stock goes lower and lower and lower with the alcohol ban in South Africa. So there's a bit of nerves and anxiety in our household, but it's okay, it's under control. Right, guys, it's amazing to be here with you. Thank you so much. I see quite a few familiar faces, which is also a little bit comforting in one way. And then it's amazing to be able to also speak to people that I've never met before. I really hope that you're going to get some value from today in terms of the culture sense check. So the first thing before I start, what I would like you to do, and I know different people have different versions of Zoom. So what I would like you to do is click on participants, and you will be able to raise your hand, and some older versions of Zoom, you probably will be able to say yes or no. And I just want you to answer the question of how many of you, so raise your hand if this is you, how many of you feel that you do not spend enough time on culture? Just for me to get an idea. No poll, just quickly a poll in the checklist of the participants. Okay, so we've got quite a few people in the beginning on my list. I see a few hands raising on the videos as well. Okay, so there's a handful of people that I see here that are saying that you are feeling that you are not spending enough time on your culture. The whole idea of my talk with you today is to do two things. For those of you who feel that you are spending enough time, I want to sense check, or I want you to sense check, are you spending your energy on the right stuff? Or are we spending energy on what we think culture is? And then for the rest, it is almost to remind you that if you feel that you are not spending enough time on it, to remind you about the importance and the impact of culture and what are the things that you can actually look at. Okay, so the whole thing is really about making sure that you are sense checking your culture focus and what it is that you're going to be doing. Now, I was quite surprised by specific statistics that I've received while doing some research on attracting talent and culture. And the one thing is about the fact, and I think, Jackie, you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but that we have to now start working for our employees. And because it's all about the employee experience. You'll remember a few years ago, we started with the whole customer experience and user experience. It's now really about employee experience. What is the full experience that they get in terms of engagement, how they feel like when they engage with you as a company, how they feel like or what they think when they're with their colleagues, from when they see a job offer, all the way through to when they even exit your business. What is that experience? The second thing is the whole idea around the Gen Z and the Gen Y, as well as the baby boomers and the new, like there's now 4 different generations in one market. But it's about the 3 main things that they're looking for when they are applying for jobs or when they are searching for jobs. And you can see there that it is about inspiration and culture, mission and purpose, as well as development. Jackie, you mentioned also about development and how important that is. And these 2 things come from a recent LinkedIn study. Now, Gallup, which I'm sure all of us are very aware of, their 2020 study has just identified that 70% of managers has an impact on how people and employees experience the culture. If you look at it from a South African perspective, there was a study done by, I think, South Africans, you all know Career Junction. 1/3 of South Africa's employees has left their jobs because of their managers. Take this to the US, that almost doubles, of course, the population is quite different. But if you think about these data and these statistics, all of these things is impacted by the culture of your business. Now, just because of the work that I do, and Kim, thank you for the nice intro in terms of my obsession with high performance, but because of that, I often have people, entrepreneurs like yourselves, as well as leaders and managers coming to me and say, we do so much for our culture. And they follow that up by saying, yeah, we do team drinks, we do team lunches, we've got an Employee of the Month award, we do amazing races, even now online, we do some like nice activities. And like my first reaction is, I wonder how much value you put on culture, and can we kind of take this discussion further so that we can really start going into depth around culture? The sarcastic me goes, really? Is that what you do in terms of your culture? Like, well done. That is only the smallest part of looking at what you do with your culture. Guys, so if you're only doing team lunches and all of those things, it's not enough. That is not part of your culture. Or it's part of your culture, but it doesn't form your culture. So the other thing is, and I think, Kim, you mentioned it in your, I think it was you mentioned in your checkout, or Jackie, it was you, that people don't stay at an organization for long anymore. It might be 5 or 6 years. And we so often, when we are attracting talent or when we are having interviews with people, we have this idea of telling people what our culture is about. It's almost like we expect them to meet our culture. You can't meet a culture, you have to physically experience it. So when you are speaking about your culture, that's almost like, I almost want to say that's kind of lip service. It's going to show me in the interview that you are living your culture. Like, don't just explain it to me. If you want to do a culture change within a business, there's so many clients that I've also seen, they go, okay, guys, we've had a meeting and leadership has now decided that we are from now on, this is how we are going to do things. So you're arranging a meet and greet with the people to meet your culture. That won't work. You have to physically experience it, and your culture will only come alive through the behavior of all the members of the organization, as well as the leadership. So if you look at there are so many cultural definitions out there, but I particularly like the one from Rolf Barling. I'm a transactional analyst myself, and I'm obsessed with the theory of transactional analysis. So hence why I like his description. I just want to get it to my slide because my eyes aren't so good. It says here, organizational culture is a set of habits and behavior within an organization exhibited by its members, occupied by values, feelings, and beliefs. I want you to focus on habits and behaviors. And it has to be done by everyone. That is where the focus is. Not events, not drinks, not necessarily just a quick fireside chat on Zoom or anything like that, just because of the world that we live in today. But it's physically about the habits and the behaviors. Simple way to look at it is, how do we do things around here? If this happens, this is how we behave around it. So for the rest of the talk, what I want to show you today is I want to show you 8 or 6 manifestations of culture. Like, what are the things that you can immediately look at in your organization today after this workshop to see how can you start changing, or how can you reflect on your culture, and is that what you want? And the second thing is just to look a little bit at what is within the employee experience, what do we need to look at? So if we look at the cultural manifestations, you can see there that the first one is really about how do you solve problems and how do you handle a crisis, like how do you approach a crisis? Now, guys, you might think, well, we just tackle it and we just deal with it. There's different ways of doing this in business. Do you make a drama out of it? Does the leadership kind of flare up? And is it always like a hurry up and people start scrolling around? Are you looking at problems and crises in quite a calm way? That's just 2 examples of how you deal with problems and crises. The second one is, how are your young leadership being trained, and are you actually promoting young leadership? So many people they promote, for example, specialists, because the person is such an amazing specialist. And now all of a sudden, look, the next thing in line for you is you need to start managing people. I've sat with a lady, she was crying in the coaching session. She's like, all I want to do is I want to code. I don't care about people. I don't want to worry about other people. I just want to code. But the idea is because we think that they need to move up, we don't actually check in with them if that is really what they want. And then when we do promote them, do you equip them with the tools that they can actually do it well? And I'm not talking about just on-the-job training, because that on-the-job training has its space 100%. But if people don't understand how to really lead others, then we fall into the statistic of the 70% of managers has an impact on people's experience, and a third of the people are leaving the business because of how they are being managed. The third one is, in terms of the cultural manifestations, is how are different stakeholders being approached? I'm talking about, how do you as a business treat your suppliers? How do you treat your customers, your clients? How do colleagues treat one another? How do you treat how do you treat any stakeholder, even if you have shareholders, if you've got non-executive directors? How are those people being treated? Are you as a business almost coming in like a critical parent, and that is your stance, because that is what the rest of the people will see, and that's how they will treat suppliers? Or are you coming more in from this is a partnership and we're collaborating? You might even be the organization that always comes in from that we are the victim and people are doing things to us. You have to assess, how are you treating those stakeholders and what it is that you are doing? Because that filters through, and people, like, I don't want to say, like, people follow what they are seeing happens in an organization. The last three is, how are risks and mistakes and failures dealt with? Jackie, you also mentioned it in terms of a learning organization. So are you paying lip service to a learning organization and say, our door is always open, but the moment someone makes a mistake, that door goes shut and you kind of start screaming and going ballistic around the mistake, which means someone will then just start hiding their mistakes. But you can't, for example, say that the door is open and then people do not have that psychological safety, because that just shows that there's a disconnect between what you want your culture to be and what it actually is. But it's important that you define how it is and what it is that you want to be, so that people can be all on the same page. And then, how is power and authority built, pursued, and taken back? It is fascinating to see, and I actually worked with a client yesterday, a nice in-person workshop, which was great to see people face-to-face for a change. But the leadership was sitting there and they were like, I don't know how to tell the people what their new working hours are in a remote space. And we were all a little bit surprised. I'm like, what? And what we realized in that session is that leader looked at the CEO and said, am I the one that can make this decision on what the working hours are? It is the most simple operational thing that you can think of. And the CEO, he was sitting, was like, oh my goodness, I have clearly not made it or not empowered this person to actually lead the way that he should lead. And yes, it's a two-way street. The leader can also step up, absolutely. But it is important to look at, how are you empowering the people so that they can make the decisions and so that they can run with things so that you don't always have to do it. And then the last one is really about, how do you resolve conflict, and how is conflict seen? Like, is it seen as a taboo? In certain companies it is, and that forms part of the culture. Or is it seen as, hey, it's just a disagreement that we have and we're going to go through this, and it's seen as an opportunity to connect and to make relationships stronger? How you as the founder and as the leadership team or the executive team deal with these things will set the scene for the rest of the business. You also have, how do you focus on your business strategies? Do you include them? Do you just go, is it a top-down approach? All of those things have an impact. And then lastly, it's also, how are your rules developed? What are the rules? Are you like a machine type organization where everything runs according to schedule? Are you a bit more family type where the rules are a little bit like, okay, you can have loads of flexi time and let's see how we can always get together and make sure things work out the same for everyone? Or are you a bit of a playground, which means that you think Google is a playground, but they actually run like a machine. But it is that sense of loads of creativity and come in and get out again. So there's many different ways of how your rules in the organization are created. And I'm hoping that you see now that culture is more than just we do drinks and amazing races. It really is about these 6 manifestations and how you have molded them into what they need to be. And I really want to say to you, you've seen the next slide already, that culture should not be a side project. It has to be a strategic pillar. If you're going to make culture a side project, you're not going to focus on it because it's always going to be pushed aside because there's always another crisis or a bigger revenue that needs to be chased or another product line that you are bringing in. If you're making it a strategic pillar, it means someone takes ownership of that. I once did another EO talk also on culture here in Cape Town. And the one forum member said to me, okay, but if it's a strategic pillar, it suggests that culture can change. And my answer to that is you can change culture if you feel that you have to, but culture is a moving, living system. And that is why it needs to be a strategic pillar, because you constantly have to see, are we maintaining what we have, or do we need to start bringing in different things because is it going in the direction that we want? So that's why the moving, living system is something that I want you to hold on to. And remember that if you don't pay attention to it, it's just going to go into its own direction and it might end up in something that you don't like. So moving from the culture that impacts the employee experience, and short for employee experience is just EX. I'm sure all of you will start hearing more and more about employee experience. And like I said earlier, it really is about the full holistic experience from the employee, starting already with before the employee even starts working with you. To simplify things, and I saw this on LinkedIn, which was great, is they said, you can look at it from the normal business process perspective in terms of people, place, product, and process. So people are all the different people that the employee engages with, all the stakeholders. Again, from colleagues to if they even have to interview potential talent, that's also their people. There's suppliers, clients, etc., internal and external clients. The place is where they work and their work environment. And more that is remote or at home or in a coffee shop or wherever it might be. But what are their experience while they are working in their environment? And also while setting up for remote teamwork, I keep saying to people, you can't necessarily buy someone a new flat so that they don't have to sit right next to their bed and work. But you can certainly check in with them in terms of their mental capacity because of their lives that is just this big. So there's loads of different things that you can do to check in on the environment that the person is working in. The product is the actual work itself, the things that they have to do, the task that they are doing, the output that they are working for. What is their experience around that? And yes, you can't just always do exactly what you want to do because there's always some admin stuff, but is the person really tapping into their strengths and are they being pushed out of their comfort zone? Again, if you think about psychological safety, that challenge together with support in order to feel that the product that they are doing is sufficient and that they're having a good experience. And then lastly is the process, kind of what systems are in place, what rules are being followed, and how easy, like communication channels, how easy is it to get answers? How easy is it to get information as you are moving ahead? Now, based on the employee experience and the stats that I shared with you right in the beginning, where I said the Gen Z, Gen X, and Gen Y, and as well as the baby boomers, they want 3 main things when they are looking for a potential new role. And these 3 things, as you can see there, it's quite a nice graph. That's why I wanted to show it to you, because it's also divided into percentages. They want inspirational colleagues and culture. This is the very first thing that they are looking for. The second thing, I'm not sure how Simon Sinek is going to feel that he sees his stuff as only second, but the second thing is about the purpose and the mission. And the third is investment in employee training. So these three things is what people are looking for. If you only talk about this in your interview, people are not going to feel it. And it's very difficult. So I would suggest that you start thinking of ways that people can physically see it. I know some organizations have a way of bringing the interview into the business for a day or two so that they can experience in assessment centers and development centers and those things. Now, what was interesting, I'm just going to go back to the previous slide. What was interesting, another client of mine, and apologies for not always saying who the client is, but it's quite an interesting industry, and you want to keep some confidentiality in terms of clients. But they just offered a software developer in South Africa. The guy is 27 years old. They offered him a 90,000 Rand salary for him to join the business. For those of you who are not in South Africa, I think that's roughly about $6,000 as a salary for a 27-year-old in South Africa. That is amazing. They were so solidly sure that this person is going to take the job. And what was the setup? They were going, okay, in 2 days' time, we're just going to do a tech assessment for him. And because we've already sent the offer, we're sure he's going to be fine, but he has to go through the tech assessment. Yes, wrong way around. And they expected a yes from the offer letter that went out. Literally a day later, after the interview, before the tech assessment even happened, they received an email to say, sorry, I've taken something else. And yes, you can also ask questions to the interviewee as to why you did it. And they were like, why, kind of just getting some feedback as to why you went for the other company. But when I did a reflection session with the client, what he said to me was two things that he learned from this interview that he had. The first thing is you cannot be so slow in doing your tech assessments. Now that's a very obvious thing. So interview and then the tech assessment. But the second thing that he said to me was, do you know that the candidate sent me his CV and he sent me his blog. And when the candidate asked me if I read the blog, I was like, oh yeah, I saw you had a blog, but I haven't had time to read it yet. And he said, that was my biggest mistake. We speak in the interview about how we care for our people and how we are really interested in what our employees are doing. But in the interview, he couldn't say that he couldn't show that actual behavior of their culture. Hence why I'm saying you can't meet the culture. So Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, especially Gen Y and Gen Z. The Gen Zs are now 23, so they're entering the work market. They have extremely high expectations. And we need to understand that it might not even be expectations based on money. It's expectations based on how am I going to be inspired in this business? How am I going to fit into the culture? Is there even a culture that actually is one that is warm and safe and that I can thrive in? And then also, am I being looked after in terms of my development? So just going to flick through the stats slide again. There's three things that I want you to go and do and think about. The first one is, what can you do to emphasize culture within your business? And here I would invite you to look at the 6 manifestations that I've sent you. What are the different, answer those manifestations and see how culture is starting to evolve, or what is the culture in the business in terms of those things? Is it things that you like, or would you like to change it? You can change culture. Yes, it's a lengthy process. I was involved, I think it was about 5 years ago, I was involved in a very big culture project with a big 5-star hotel in the waterfront. For those of you who live here, you can try and figure out who that is. And we started a culture project, and we started on all the levels, but we did different things at the different levels. So we started with the executive team, creating alignment, because there was a little bit of inter-team friction, but creating alignment, creating a sense of how the leaders are going to be behaving. Then we started with the next level. How are they going to do team developments to build their teams up as a leader? Then we created ambassadors, and these ambassadors had to take kind of management of the culture project. And then we did soft skills development and customer service experience development so that the employee experience and the customer experience are linked and one and the same thing, so that both of them can experience the same. And it probably was one of my favorite projects that I've ever been involved in. And we've got the HR director on video saying that their bed nights has increased, their profit increased with 200%. 200% for already really successful hotel. And that is just because of all the effort that they've put into making sure that everyone follows the same culture. Not just the employees, not just the future talent, but their clients as well. That for me is huge. And I think that, like, if you don't understand the importance of culture, I really hope that you do now. The second thing that I want you to do is to revisit your interview process. And it's not necessarily just the interview process, but the whole hiring, the whole talent acquisition process. Jackie gave you that whole house concept that you can follow. And because that has a massive impact on your employee experience. And Kim, you mentioned in your reflection just before I started, the candidate is interviewing you 100%. Don't be that stiff, rigid, old HR kind of person that only interviews from a critical parent point of view, but allow the person to also interview you. We expect, when we interview people, to go to our websites. We expect them to read our blogs. We expect them to go to LinkedIn pages. We expect them to do a lot of research. Do the same. Pay attention. And if your candidate has a blog, go and read the damn blog, is what I want to say. And then the last thing, in terms of the 3 points before I'm almost finished, is, are you developing your leaders and your people? Are you developing current leaders who's been in the positions for many years and they might have kind of reached a stagnation and they just do the same thing over and over? Are you developing your middle management and your line management? And are you developing your future potential leaders? People don't naturally know how to lead. Let me rephrase. Not everyone knows naturally how to lead. And it's, Jackie, and again, you mentioned earlier about soft skills training. I always laugh because it's not soft skills. It's one of the most complex things to do, is to lead people. And like, yeah, we're not going to spend time on soft skills training this year. What? So pay attention to those people that you are expecting to lead your business. It's a complex thing to do. If they do not know how to do it, you have to give them an opportunity to do it. What we did is we created an online self-study course for leaders so that they can develop their own high-performing team. You can scan the barcode, check it out. If you like it, there's a promo code that you can use. But it is literally to develop the leaders within your business so that they also can develop the people that reports into them and then go from one performance to high performance. So with that said, I want you to understand that culture is not just your problem. Culture is everyone's business, but it is yours too. You can't just make it someone else's problem. It is the whole organization's problem. And you can start by living it. You can start by making it a strategic pillar so that people and potential candidates can start seeing it. So the last 3 things before I close, Kim, and then I can hand over back to you. What should you do with this? The first thing that I want you to do is I want you to go and ask your employees the feedback based on the 6 manifestations. If you want the manifestations or if you want the whole slide deck, send me an email address. My email address is there at the bottom. I'll happily share the slides with you just so that you have those manifestations. But ask your people, what do they think are happening in the 6 different areas? The second thing is identify who can be ambassadors and perhaps brainstorm a little bit of a culture project with your ambassadors and what can they do and how much ownership can they take for this culture project. And then the last one, those 3 action steps that I've just shown you in terms of re-emphasize your culture, re-look at your whole talent process, and also developing your leaders. What are you doing in order to make sure that you do it well? Because at the end, your employees and the people that engage with your business, they can either gossip about your business without guilt, or they can speak about it with pride, massive pride. And you are the one that can keep it alive and moving. Cool.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I always felt like I wanted to start clapping. Please feel free to clap if you're like me. Awesome. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot, Tilian. Thank you. And we're going to open up to some questions shortly. I think for me, the highlight was when you said that 70% of management has impact and 1/3 of managers are forcing your people out. And that's quite real. The fact that you can't meet culture and that culture is reflected in your organizational habits and your behaviors. So it's reflected in all your stakeholder relationships. How you treat your staff is how they will ultimately treat your suppliers. It reminds me of a quote that says, your employees will never treat your customers better than you treat them. So your team, if you treat, that will never happen. And ask yourself, is your organization a learning organization? Are the mistakes a learning opportunity or an explosion of emotions? Do you really have an open door policy? Those are some questions that I'll be asking myself and reflecting over the process.
I think maybe, Kim, on that last note of yours in terms of, are you really a learning organization? I just want to see, here we go. In this book, it's called Black Box Thinking by Matthew Said. He speaks about the difference between the hospitality industry and the aviation industry, and how the hospitality industry, nurses are scared to voice when they see a doctor doing something wrong because it's like a critical parent to a child. Yet in the aviation industry, the black box, so there's two black boxes, one to see kind of literally what happened with the systems and stuff, but the other one is the communications. And that black box is used to review all the conversations that was happening, and that then gets put into journals and training and the mistakes that has been made so that the new or other pilots can learn from that. Hence why I think his name, Sullivan, who landed
Sully.
He had an interview, and on radio he said, I didn't land that plane by myself. It's because of the mistakes and the blood, unfortunately, that was shed by previous pilots that I learned from, that I knew what to do. And if we can take the aviation mentality of learning organization versus, and not the hospitality, not hospitality, medical, sorry, I've got the hotel in my head, the medical industry, then you're already much further in terms of being a learning organization than what you were before. Sorry, it's not hospitality, it's medical.
No, absolutely. I think I've crashed a few planes myself, so I wish I need to take that advice. Do we have any questions for Helene? We have a few minutes for Q&A.
Helene, I just put mine on the group. Nice to see you this morning. Thanks for an inspiring chat. I just wanted to, I've got a personal sort of issue where I've got a family business where my nephews and nieces are slowly starting to come into the business, and I'm really battling to engage with this way of working and only really being interested in doing the fun things and not really keen on doing the admin and really want to move on to the next project and the next project. And I'm trying to have this culture of you know, stick to your job, do what you've done, everything that I've learned for the past 20 odd years or so, without giving my age away. How would you practically, you know, advise on how to manage the new generations? And I always get mixed up between X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, so just to get your confusion about the generations, the Gen Z, they are about 22 years old, between 7 and 22 years old. The Gen Ys, which is your millennials, they between 23 and 38. And your Gen Xs are between 39 and 54. And then your baby boomers is 55 to 73. And then your silent generation or your veterans are 74 and up. So just as a quick.
Thanks.
And then for those who have 5-year-olds like me, they are called the Gen Alphas. So I still have to research as to why Gen Alpha. I don't know why yet. But Joss, I think the big thing here is, what I would do is I would get everyone, and I always speak from a facilitator consultant perspective. So I would get everyone in the room and almost say, how do you see the current culture and how things are done? Maybe even using the 8 or the 6 manifestations that I showed you. Capture that and then go, how do we want to be as a business? Knowing that we do have that quality of a family business, but what are the things that we want to look at and how do we want it to be? And then based on that, because that way you almost identifying together what the culture moving forward is, because you've got new people coming in and you're creating buy-in because they're part of the process. And once you have that on flip charts or however you want to do it, then you go, okay, how are we going to do this? What are the expectations that we have of one another? What is negotiable? What is non-negotiable? Especially in a family organization. And you don't have to be family to have a family culture within an organization, because the family organization can tiptoe around one another because I have to be nice the whole time. I can't challenge you too much because I still have to see you tonight, or I still want to have a beer with you tomorrow. So it's really then from that is the contract, from that is the culture that we want, to what I call the psychological contract. How are we going to do things? How are mistakes going to be dealt with? How are we going to deal with problems? How do we hand over authority? Those 6 manifestations can really guide you in that. And then together you identify that contract. And that would be almost the very first step that I would do. And I will also then ask within the family, who is very passionate about making sure that we stick to these things? And that person becomes your ambassador. And that person can also check in, and everyone knows he or she has that authority to do that. And you or she can also then start thinking of things that you can do, like the events, to play into that culture and do check-ins with people and things like that. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Absolutely. Thanks so much. I think, see, there's a poll here. Do you think your employees experience your culture? Okay, and then it's very similar, but 59 at yes and 41 at no. And yeah, I guess that if they don't experience the culture, how do they talk about your business? Like, I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to be gossiping about it, but if they are not talking about your business with passion, they are the people that knows your business best, that can also then attract talent, especially if it's your A players. So it's really important to look at that, yeah.
I love what you said now about, actually asking your whole team their perspective and then being where you want, seeing where you want to be. When we did this exercise in my organization, I always thought we were a family. And my team actually called it a cult rather than a family, which is like fairly closely, but it's actually quite different. And understanding that nuance was fascinating. So
Rolf Barling, he also, he speaks about 3 different types, and I've alluded to it in this talk: the machine type organization, the family type, and the playground. And if you in, for example, an interview, if you sell a playground, but actually you're operating like a machine, that A player that you just employed, they're going to leave because they were sold a playground or they were sold a family and then they get a machine. So it's really important to understand what type of organization are you, what do you stand for, so that you don't give that false sense of meet our culture, but rather experience it. Yeah. I did see someone just asking or saying that they couldn't see the email address. So what I'm going to do, I'm just quickly going to type up my email address in the...
I just did.
Oh, did you? Thank you so much.
I didn't.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hillian. Cool. Hillian.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your talk. I think it really resonated with our experiences as well, in terms of literally the direct impact of culture on the bottom line. I actually was recently chatting to a client, and for 10 years, he had worked specifically on culture as an element to drive bottom line. And then he was actually, because of his success in terms of profitability, deployed to one of the international regions. And within a year and a half, they had actually dropped their profit so substantially that, and that was based purely on the leader that came in, that they brought him back. And amazingly, during the COVID pandemic last year, where a lot of businesses were really struggling, they actually gained more than 40% market share from their competitors, just based on the culture experience. So that resonated so much, and I really appreciate that you linked that through to the actual profitability of an organization, because I think it's absolutely true.
Thanks, Natasha, to share that. And yeah, there is really a direct link. It's just so damn difficult to measure it. And people in the beginning like, oh, I don't want to spend this money, or I don't want to get externals in, or I don't want to spend my internal staff's time on this because we don't know how much revenue or how much return on investment it's going to give. It's very difficult to measure it, but it definitely is a feeling that you can see. And when you start putting certain metrics in place that you know directly is influenced by the culture and productivity and performance, lack of like the drop in absenteeism, the increase in requests for mentorship and requests for coaching, all of those things can be metrics to measure that productivity.
Absolutely. You know, as you were talking around the stats on the impact of the manager, I was just wondering from the EO perspective, and possibly look at sort of a hands up sort of quick poll around, were people aware that it was such a high impact? I mean, 70% is significant. Would you be comfortable with us possibly just, kind of a quick show of hands if people were aware that it was such an impact?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if everyone can hear me.
Do you want us to put it on the group, on the chat?
Yeah, I mean, either sort of a show of hands, or maybe, I'm not sure. It's just, it would be interesting to know if everyone sort of had that level of, sort of the impact that it has. 70%.
My assumption is most people do underestimate it.
Yeah, it's I think for a lot of EO members also where you've kind of handed over authority and some power to your executive team or to your leadership team. And this is maybe also a reflection point for you, is we don't always check in on what are they creating within the business, and even the level below. Some people might, like, to give you an example, I've got a friend who is working within a business, and his direct manager is, like, I mean, there's loads of different words that I can use. He's physically looking for other work. But what he says about the other team's manager is he sings his praises. So you can have a phenomenal culture, which that company has, but the one manager is almost creating a toxic subculture, and other managers are really living up that culture. You need to be aware of those things, or your leadership team needs to be aware of those things. Just because your company is performing revenue-wise and in market share and those things doesn't mean that all the managers or all the leaders in the business are cultivating the kind of behavior that you want within that business. So it's just a quick one. One manager can really create a lot of damage that you lose A players. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so very, very much. I have shared your email address, so if anyone has got any questions for Helene or wants to get the slide deck, please go ahead and email Helene. And also I try to snap that I'd love to get that QR code again so that I can have a look at that course you built out. Looks super cool. So Helene, thank you so much from us at EO. We really, really appreciate you coming to talk to us today. We are going to go into a 10-minute break just to stretch legs. I need some more caffeine. And we're going to regroup after that and do a breakaway session, which is going to be facilitated by some of the MindCore team and some of us, and just sort of have some lively discussions around some of the topics we've just learned. So we'll see you back here at about 9:15. Thank you so much, Helene.
Thanks, guys. Keep well. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you
Bye.
very much.
All right, so we're going to start by, I'm going to ask Jackie to take control again, and we're going to split off into some little working groups for about 35 minutes and some breakout sessions. Can I ask everyone to put their camera on now, please? If you are in the session, then we can continue. Over to you, Jackie.
Jackie, you're on mute. Jackie, you're on mute.
Please. Yes, I've got it. Sorry. Typical. Great with people, bad with technology. So we've had some fantastic learnings in the last session, and thank you very much to Helene once again. Some very interesting discussion points there that have come out. The next part of the process that we're going to do is we're literally going to break away into smaller teams. And we're going to have a bit of discussion as members. You will be allocated into the teams. You've got the questions which Natasha is going to take you through, and really look at how we collectively solve these problems. I mean, what resonated with me coming through from Helene's presentation specifically is that culture is not an event. It is something that people get involved with and collectively share, and very similar to solving business problems nowadays in the world that we face, because a lot of us don't have the answers, although many of us have got answers to some of them. So these sessions really are for you to spend some time engaging with the topics around selection, around how to create competitive advantage, etc., and then to be able to feedback. We're going to spend about 30 minutes in these sessions, and what I would suggest that you do is, if you could please select a champion or a speaker for your group that you're allocated into, so that when you're called on, and we're going to, from a panel point of view, just call on a couple of groups just to share their feedback, to talk on your behalf, and then to engage and also share learnings going forward. We will randomly select those, as I mentioned, and then at the end of the process, we will then be able to take any questions and answers as well from a plenary perspective. So 30 minutes in your group sessions, you'll come back into the plenary. The panel will drop in and drop out of your discussions, because that's where the interesting discussion actually happens. So with that is the context. I hand over to Natasha to just take you through the types of questions and how they're allocated.
Thank you, Jackie. So I think what has been said and what really is important, and something that I do love about the EO forums, is that if you can just incorporate your own personal experiences. We've kept the groups quite small so that you will each have time to really share and reflect on the questions, and be able to incorporate both the talks that you've heard today, as well as, you know, your own experiences from that. So what you've been allocated into groups. If I can ask group 1, 2, and 3 to answer the first two questions. We will keep the questions up on the slides. And so the first question is, how can I improve the performance of my business through attracting and selecting the right talent? I think we've covered that quite a bit today, but I would love for you to incorporate your own personal experience. And question 2, are the people in my business giving me the competitive edge in my current and potential markets? So group 4, 5, and 6, if you can have a look at question 3 and 4, how can we ensure our current and potential new team is fit to meet the future needs of my business, including as a leader for my business? And question 4, how can we drive the right type of productivity using the episode 1 information that we've shared with you today? So you will have 30 minutes. The panel will pop in and out as well of the groups should you need clarity. But we really do look forward to the feedback and sharing after the 30 minutes. Are there any questions around just on the questions or anything before we break away? I'm taking that as a no. Good luck, everyone, and we'll see you in 30 minutes.
Okay, sorry, my dog here is like coughing.
Team 2, I'm sorry I got cut off there. I think you got the gist though.
Everyone's back, so Jackie, you can start.
Okay, fantastic. So yes, we try to get to all groups, and thank you very much. I have picked up on very, very interesting trends and discussions, very valuable discussions. Unfortunately, I was also cut off very last minute, so these are not small questions, I think is what the timing is telling us. These are bigger questions that need a little bit more time to be addressed. We have given, if you want to take things offline, I saw a lot of people reaching out and saying, I've had that experience and we can take it offline. Some of the trends that are coming through in terms of the groups that I actually engaged with is actually very similar to what the discussions were. And regardless of the trends, because each champion that you've selected or leader for your team is going to give feedback to the group, and the group will be able to engage, share learnings, and what are the various options that you can take. But the one thing that came out across all the groups is the element of trust, first and foremost. And the other thing is, how do we keep this practical? And the third thing is, well, I'm not really selecting. Given the state of business and the economy as it is and where we are, I'm not really recruiting. But I will challenge you to also think about, so how do you retain? Because that's part of your process, and you can apply exactly the same steps. So I do want to, before we just not break out, but start sharing, and we're going to select groups randomly to share their findings and some of their solutions, and maybe they've got more questions back to the group, because a lot of times this is what happens. But there's actually a formula. Since trust is something that went right throughout all the groups, that I'd like to share with you, and I'll pop it out to you on the chat, is something called the trust equation. And I don't know how many of you have ever been exposed to that. So if you haven't, just quickly, what it basically is trust consists of a basic equation and with a denominator. And that equation is, it is credibility of the individual. It is added to reliability. So what they say is what they do, and they deliver. The credibility is they know what they're talking about. And the third element to that equation is impact, or intimacy rather. And intimacy is about sharing a little bit, and not in a strange way. Intimacy is about sharing a little bit in terms of who I am as a human. Being a little bit vulnerable, where people can see you and not see the producer or the machine in the business. This is all divided, and the denominator to this is, if your social orientation is high, and you're constantly thinking, well, what can I say? What answer can I give? What do I need to sell? You know, you're thinking before they finish even speaking. The bigger that is, the lower the number is going to be. It's a basic equation. So that in itself, and you can Google it, it's out there, it's a known business term. So it really does work. And there's a fantastic book called The Trusted Advisor, which talks about this specifically. Not a new book, it's been around for a while. So hopefully that would help you with how you develop trust and what you should be looking out for. Just now we're going to select some groups, and I hope you've all selected your champions that are going to give some feedback. And as I said, we're not looking for perfect answers at all. We're looking to really engage and have a discussion around this. And so if you've got more questions back to the group, by all means, use this opportunity to learn from one another. Problem solving is definitely not something we do on our own. So how do we split this? And maybe I should have actually asked that question. I don't know, Natasha, do you want to pick a group to give feedback?
Yeah, I mean, I think, shall we go with just group one, because there was some very, very interesting discussions around there, especially related to sort of, you know, how does motivation come back to the selection and hiring? How do you keep people motivated? So I think possibly group one to start.
No, good. Yeah, no, it's been quite very much more interesting discussion on group one. And there's a theme that goes, as you put it, the motivation was kind of a theme. But one thing that we realized that it's so difficult to manage people. I think one thing that came very clear to us that it's not an easy thing. It's very difficult, that we all connect and realize that now. But I think what we kind of saying that how, and all of us were saying that the processes has to be, you have to have a processes in terms of like, I mean, from assessment, could be from a technical, could be from the soft, it could be cut. So there has to be an assessment that you are having when you're recruiting, so that you can have like able to recruit a right person. And I think a second one is more just to say that what motivates people to come. I mean, what I mean, to just understand, I mean, the driving forces that from the people that are coming in, is it money? Is it family? Is there time? So once you kind of understand and able to gauge, to understand that what motivates, and that makes you, I mean, to understand it. And most is more just profiling the employees, just to make sure that you've got the profiling, I mean, of the people. And there was a kind of also realization that we have to go back to the vision, the culture, the values, to the DNA of the organization now. So that's how have to work it out and make sure that the vision and the accountabilities. And also nicely was more also that even the staff members, as much as like you are trying, they must also they must be accountable themselves, in the sense that they have also responsibility where they able to create some kind of like I mean, open, frank discussion, or having anonymous polls that they're able to share what is not working, what is working now, or even a box where they could have been able to share what they feel that it's like no longer working, what they feel it's like it's working now. And then also there has to be a consistent communication with the staff, that ongoing, I mean, communication. And it was more about the expectation. There must be clarity on the expectation, and the expectation must be clear, so there was no ambiguity. It was a problem now. And it was kind of interesting. I mean, some were kind of saying they're also part of, if you like, you employ, you're recruiting, you also giving a kind of a book, like example, a book like a Radical Kanda, where you give a book so the employee can read it before they be part of the team. And then lastly, there must be a authentic, honest, raw feedback engagement. For feedback is key for, I mean, getting more stuff. So that's how the team will come about in terms of like this very interesting, I mean, topic.
Thank you very much. Those are definitely very strong trends, and the areas that stood out for me, especially from a group perspective, is the admission that leading people is not, it's not for the faint-hearted, because it's the one asset in your business that you cannot control. It's volatile and it's messy and it's complex. So I think that definitely resonates. And the other component is around following the process and making it as simple and practical for yourselves. To the larger group, any questions for group one? Does this resonate? Do you want to go a little bit deeper with regards to this? So my one question while everybody thinks, if there are any more, Livio, is the fact that when we talk things like culture and we talk things like, you took some big words like being authentic, being raw, being clear on how you will define that and at what point, who does define that? And I think, you start at the first step. So my question to your group, and not necessarily just yourself, but to the group would be, what comes first? And how do you define that? And, if you just get that right, do you think that would be a good, strong foundation going forward? And if you don't know, that's also fine.
Yeah, no, I think it was interesting from CEDAW. Maybe we could also elaborate, and Michael, it's more on saying that, from day one, when you come in an organization on the recruitment, you kind of been frank. You are part of us, you are going to be part of us, you are going to be able to live and eat and sleep this kind of value that we have it. And also we give you kind of a period of time within a month or 3 months maximum, just to gauge, to see if you are fitting with us, so we can able to determine in terms of, you are right fit for the organization now. But it's just like being frank with yourself in terms of what's like, also being open, not only just like this is the way we do it, just open in terms of like finding that there's kind of a difference, there's a diversity, people are kind of seeing different things, but open in the sense that they've been frankly speaking, so there's no kind of holy cows where things are not being discussed. Anything can be discussed, and just how you open up in a way that you create a space for people to have but the key is like feedback. More people must be able.
Absolutely. Feedback is actually one of the biggest skills from a skill point of view leaders need to learn, because we're very good at giving feedback, especially when people are not performing. We're not that great at receiving feedback and getting upward feedback and getting that engagement going within our organizations. And it really is a skill. Giving feedback and receiving feedback is hard, and you need quite a mature environment that is able to adapt and give very specific feedback. And there's quite a few ways in terms of how that can be done, which very happy to share with you if you'd like a little bit of a quick guide or a cheat sheet in terms of how to do that. But it's probably one of the most important elements of an inspirational leader, is to be able to show that vulnerability and know when to support, but also when to lead and when to be decisive. So it's that balance.
Jackie, just a comment add on, if that's okay. I think a lot of leaders around the world feel that it's almost, because they're a leader, they need to know these things, that leadership is, something that they're doing, so they need to know all the elements. And I think you raised a very important point, that there's actually a lot of skills that we can learn and add to our toolbox to actually then face what a leader has to do.
Fantastic, yes. I also see that there's a comment here around getting feedback from the team has been super insightful from Mike, and really focusing on what the BAG objectives are. And then for those that are not familiar with Good to Great, it's the big, hairy, audacious goal. It's that one thing that we're all hunting. So being very clear and focus on your personal bags and how they continue doing that as a company. What should we stop doing as a company? So what's working, what's not working, and what process or change would you bring into the company if you were the CEO from an organizational perspective? So very, very, very valuable input there, Mike. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions to group one? Anything you'd like to share, or should we move on?
I think in the interest of time, let's move on, Jackie.
Okay, so Jackie, Mike was actually part of group 3, and I also found the talk and the insights hugely valuable. It was mostly linked to, the productivity element of improving your competitor advantage. So I wonder if anyone would like to speak from group 3.
Okay. Has group 3 got a...
Sorry, I thought we were group 4. Sorry, Sean is a sponsor from our
Oh,
group.
you're right. Sorry, Mike. It was 4. Apologies.
Okay, no problem.
Actually,
Just say that again.
I
was just leading that group, or spokesperson. Do you want to just ask that question again, Natasha? Sorry. Or you're on mute.
I'm just trying to navigate through to the questions. If anyone has it in front of them.
Oh, do you want me to? So can I tell you? Do you want me to tell you about our group? Or
yes, please.
What? Okay, so
just some of the top level insights that you had around the questions.
So I think for us it was that people are doing daily and weekly huddles, and what they're finding is working, especially from Ashif, is that the values, he's brought in values in each of his departments, and each of the departments were bringing in their own values. And a big theme for everybody was getting coaching in for everybody. I think you saw Mike's questions up there, and then also just really interacting with the employees to find out what their BHAGs are personally with business. What should we be doing, stopping, what advice do they have for the business? If they were in the CEO role, what would they do? And just kind of, I think, linking their goals and making sure that the way you give back to the employees, but also what their goals are. So linking the KPIs or the rewards for the KPIs that they do actually goes back to the employee and what they want. So if it's monetary, if it's more training or whatever. And then the other thing was where are you and what to do. So so for Ben, it was like rebuilding his culture. It was also like removing toxic people and realizing that from his exec team, by restructuring that and getting people out that weren't part of the culture, and that it started really supporting his business. I'm not sure if I left anything else out. A big thing also, Mike, I asked him how all the things he was doing, like from an operation, he said he was mentoring sessions, he was getting other EO members to coach his team. And one of his big values is to keep learning in the business. And that's why they keep doing training and development. So he's kind of living back to what their culture is and all about learning. So, and then Lance was doing, he was doing his daily huddles, the scrums, the monthly BHAGs. And a question we asked him is, who's doing most of the talking? He said he is. And I think from that is that, I think it was the same with my team before, is that if you're the leader and you're doing all the talking, then is that a really good huddle every day? And are we giving our team the proper tools to do what they need to do?
Thank you for that. Thank you for Sean. And I think, I mean, I just want to catch on to what you've just said, and I think it is so insightful. You know, if you're running the huddles as the leader, you're the one that's talking the most. And I think we all go into that because we come out of that old way of thinking that, well, we are the leaders, so we better have the answers, otherwise who would follow us? And that has shifted quite significantly. So fantastic insight, and also about how you would integrate your values and giving the support for your people to step up. And assigning the mandates and accountability to run a huddle, as an example. Instead of you running the huddle, let them run the huddle, let them come up with the agenda. So fantastic insight, and thank you very much. I also want to pick up on the removing of the toxicity. It's an element that we haven't spoken about yet, and we've looked at BHAG. It's already been presented as a philosophy, so most of you have read it, good to great. And that was the whole bus philosophy, you know, getting the right people on the bus and getting the wrong people off the bus. But the other challenge I want to give to everybody here is also, once you're on the bus, understand the seats on the bus can change. So sometimes you hire somebody into a particular role, which is for that particular seat, but based on their potential and the coaching that you're doing, if they're not 100% effective, move them to a new seat. It doesn't mean they're not a performer. So it's just a different way of looking at that. So thank you very much. Fantastic learnings. Anybody want to ask any questions?
One last thing.
I want a question.
They just also mentioned a software called, I think, A-Line, which they're using for their KPIs and their huddles. And yeah, I don't know much about it, but it seems to be working, and people are talking about it.
Fantastic. I don't know it either. So anybody that is using it, if you could drop the link for the group, that would be fantastic, and everybody can have a look at it and see if that's something that could possibly, you know, be useful to you in your businesses. Thank you very much for that, Sean. Sorry, I think, Trevor, you wanted to ask something?
No, sorry, it was me, Jackie, Lance. Yeah, so, you know, with that question about the huddles, I've moved away from running the huddles, but I still sit there and I have to really bite my tongue what's going on, and I have to sit there with great patience because I don't know, I haven't found someone who really gets excited about it and gets excited about being in that leadership position. And, you know, I almost find that a lot of the guys are very reluctant leaders. And that's something we've been grappling with a lot. You know, every time I get it, I just can't help it anymore. I'm going, right, that's enough. This is, we've lost our, you know, this is supposed to be a little punchy meeting about let's get out there in the morning. And it turns into a bit of a waste of time and rather uninspiring. And it's hugely frustrating. And I don't want to, you know, I'm tired of listening to my own voice in my own business. But at the same time, I get disappointed by, you know, what goes on if I'm not guiding the process. So it's like this, I don't know which way to go. I don't, you know. Yeah. And I think we can also open that to the group because I think a lot of people feel that. But in terms of what role to play, and it's fantastic that you're running the huddles and being part of those huddles. But what I've found is, and you used the word reluctant leader, and I think also Helene covered it in terms of, you know, we tend to put people in leadership roles and they don't really want it. So it's also understanding, that's where it comes down to understanding in your team who wants to be that champion and lead that it motivates and drives them. And then as the leader, even though you're silent in the meetings, meeting with these people beforehand when they're driving the huddles or, you know, setting the agendas in terms of how you transfer knowledge from you into them to support them in those sessions. So it's, you know, it's a case of we can't just throw them into it at times that we've never done it. And it, you know, you've got very clear expectations as well, but I'd like to hear from the rest of the team if they've had a similar challenge. But Lance, very happy to take that discussion offline because there are a couple of things that you can do that can support and assist you.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I'd be interested to hear what everyone else has to say.
Yes.
So Jackie, can I say something? Yeah, I was going to just have a similar point to Jackie regarding engagement, checking in with the individual. I think that a bit of coaching and maybe understanding what is making this individual not perform to the level that you want. It might be a variety of things. So for example, it might be he or she has their own style and is nervous to kind of bring it in because they think they've got to try and emulate your style. So I think it's all about really coaching and engaging with that individual offline and getting to the bottom of what it is. It's lack of confidence, lack of knowledge, lack of enthusiasm. There could be a whole variety of things, or maybe they don't want to, they don't want to step on your toes. So I think you could fix that by just engaging with them while they're not doing it.
Yeah. I'm just conscious of time, guys. Sorry, Natasha.
Sorry, Marwan had raised his hand.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Marwan. Apologies.
No worries. I found myself, I ramble on and on, especially when I'm the boss trying to run the meetings. And what I did is I started using my phone and my timer, and I time myself. I give myself 5 minutes in the meeting. So as soon as I start talking, I hit start. And I look at my phone. I can't speak more than 5 minutes in a meeting.
That's a fantastic tip. And thank you very much for that, Marwan. Yes. So even when you're running the engagement sessions, they're quite structured, and putting a time limit on yourself and knowing what message you want to drop within that 5 minutes is a fantastic tip around just governing yourself. It's also why a lot of huddles and team meetings, when we still had everybody in the workspace, and you can do it online now as well, is they've got those agile stand-up meetings. So it's a quick check-in, it's everybody gets engaged, and you have very clear time, so it doesn't go on forever and a day. So thank you, Marwan. That's a fantastic tip to the team. I would like, before we close off, because I know we've only got a couple of minutes and we do still want to have a Q&A to the panel if there is anything, but I would like to hear from a group, maybe group 4, in terms of addressing the other 2 questions, because we've had a couple of groups address the similar question. So if we have got time, maybe group 4, if you wouldn't mind. Joss, I think you were the lead there.
Sorry, we were group 3. Calvin.
Oh, group 3. Sorry, the numbers have changed.
Mr. Coach, not you.
So group 4.
Yep.
I thought we were group 5.
Should I just go ahead anyway?
Go for it, Calvin.
Cool. Yeah, so I'll be quick, cognizant of time as well. So there seemed to have just been a common thread to answer question one, which was how can you improve the performance of the business through attracting and selecting the right talent, and there was some discussion, maybe more questions that we can discuss or think about is how do we hire people that are more experienced than ourselves. That's not always an easy thing. If you're trying to hire people that can do things that you can't necessarily do. It's sometimes a little bit of a dance that Duncan mentioned in a tricky scenario, and also that always feel like you're trying to snap up people as they're available, as opposed to being able to go through this process and end up with the kind of person that you want. So one of the discussions was almost to have an ongoing recruitment process, this budget that just keeps rolling and not necessarily waiting for that time, and then also about hiring people who you can trust to treat their roles and divisions as businesses, and then having the confidence to have them feeding information and suggestions and ideas upwards, as opposed to pushing that down. So I think trust was quite important as well. And then question 2, which was, are the people in my business giving me the competitive edge in my current and potential markets? And there was a resounding yes. Most of us seem confident in our teams, but the question was, how do you grow that core base of strong, powerful people, talented people, and kind of maintain that confidence as you try and scale. And I think a lot of the general answers to both questions was empowering people to take control of their divisions and their mandates, and making all aspects of their responsibilities, making sales everyone's mandate. And the advantage seems to come from having a full team that understands business with a big capital B, that they know the workings of business and are able to take decisions based on that, as opposed to having their small little specific responsibilities. I think that's us.
Thank you, Kelvin. Some very interesting learnings there, and I think challenges that most businesses sit with to take them to the next level. Hiring for trust, again, is a big challenge. Hiring people that know more than you do is a challenge we see in the markets every day, and that does come with the fact that if you're able to differentiate in terms of what that mandate is, and being confident and mature enough to accept you don't need to know everything. And there are people that you surround yourself with. But anybody from the team would like to give input or any suggestions in terms of what Kelvin and the group have shared with us? Okay, so the one area, as I said, Kelvin, that I did pick up is and I think it was in your group where you said, how do we go to the next level? And that's really what you look at talent for in your business. It's about going to that next level. And again, I would just caution you to come back to that purpose that you're trying to drive and who you want to be. So it's easy to say, take us to the next level, but we've got to define what that level is. Also, there's a very nice book by Marcus Buckingham around strengths. And there's quite a lot of Gallup polls, et cetera, and what we tend to do in our business is we look, so as you mentioned, give everybody responsibility for sales and make that everybody's accountability, and that everybody stays up at night around that. And owner-managed businesses, that's what we do. So you sort of think it's a natural process, but it's not a strength in everyone. So the Marcus Buckingham and the Gallup actually looks at focusing on people's strengths and optimizing those as opposed to constantly focusing on the gaps that individuals have and the development areas that they have. It's like telling me I'm going to run the 100 meters in under 4 seconds. It's never going to happen. So please don't develop me as an athlete. Rather use my strengths that are there. So we spend a lot of time and money developing people's gaps, as opposed to if you can just think about working on people's strengths and then aligning that to the areas that you want to assign, your speed to performance is going to be significantly increased. So might be a nice little takeaway. But if there aren't any questions to the group, and thank you very much to all the champions stepping up and just reflecting what they've learned in their businesses across all 4 questions and how they could possibly apply it, and some of the tips that have come from the groups. It's fantastic to see. And as we said at the very beginning of today's session, is how do we keep it practical? How do we keep it realistic? And how do we make it achievable to ensure that we're agile and constantly relevant to markets that we haven't yet defined? So thank you very much for that. What I would like to do is, we've got just about 5 minutes, literally, and maybe just spend about 3 minutes for the panel from a talent perspective, just to answer any questions that you may have, or something that's sort of just niggling you that you've not had an opportunity to share or discuss. Now's the opportunity. We will share email addresses as well, so welcome to contact anybody. But maybe the next couple of minutes, and then we'll just go to close out just before past. So now I'm going to try and keep quiet. Any questions from anyone?
See how difficult it is.
Well, I've got a question to you, maybe, is in terms of, given what you've taken out today, I would like to challenge you, each and every one of you in your businesses, to take one of these learning principles, and maybe it's as simple as looking at your people or redefining culture, or which is a big one, actually, that's too big. But take something out and apply it in your environment. See how it works. If it doesn't work, provide feedback. And so from that perspective, I'd like to challenge you to really not use this as just a normal information sharing session, but to really be able to pull out what's going to practically help you in your businesses, and also give feedback in terms of your learning.
I think that's a great idea, Jackie. Sorry, I'm going to hand over to Kim with 3 minutes left to do the closing.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think one of the things that I will do practically in the next few days, it was an idea that came from our group, and that is to add culture as a line item on the income statement. So we sort of all noticed that we have like a little bit of teamwork and a little bit of like training here and there, but when Helene mentioned to make it a strategy pillar, we thought it might be quite useful to have culture as an income statement line item. So I think that's one of the practical things I'm going to do. So thank you so much for moderating today, Jackie, and teaching us so many valuable insights. Again, a huge thank you to Mindcore, who's put this all together. Another thank you must go to our strategic partner in Joburg, Penguin, who did the videos, etc., and to the learning chairs and to Lara for facilitating. In 2 weeks' time, we're going to be regrouping and doing the second pillar or the second module. We're going to take the learnings from today to tweak that and to add more content. So we will be sending out some communication asking you about today's session so that we can sort of adapt and tweak it. So please be sure to fill that in. Even if you can't make the next session, it's hugely valuable for us to be able to work on the content and make it as applicable as possible. And we will be sending out some of those documents and templates that Jackie shared, also the recording and the slide decks. I put a link here to the Credo Growth course that Helene mentioned, as well as the promo code. So you can go ahead and click on that if you want to go and check out some more development for your leadership team. And otherwise, from the Talent Hub team, this is us. That's a wrap for today. And we'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That was great.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.